Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we are going on an incredible journey. We're tracing the lineage of modern manufacturing back to a rather unexpected origin, 19th century firearms. It's a fascinating story of how the intense cutthroat quest to build a better gun inadvertently births the modern world as we know it, setting a standard for precision that completely surrounds us today.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did a 19th century revolver change the engine in your car? I mean, it sounds like a massive stretch, right? But history is absolutely full of these hidden butterfly effects, where a single, seemingly unrelated invention ripples outwards to completely redefine entirely different industries. To understand how that happened, we have to look back at the chaotic beginnings of mass production. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the Revolver Revolution, and Samuel Colt's bold vision.
Meet Samuel Colt. Long before he conceptualized the first practical revolver, he was just a bold, fiercely innovative thinker. Remarkably, before finding any real success, he was actually a failed businessman. His early pyrotechnic experiments literally kept getting him into trouble. But the guy possessed a legendary marketing skills, so much so that he basically invented modern branding, forever making his name synonymous with the revolver itself.
You can see how rocky the start was right here on the timeline. In 1836, Colt takes out a patent for his multiple-shot revolver. But by 1842, his first factory in New Jersey completely fails. The guns were just too complicated and way too expensive to make. But then, in 1847, his fortunes dramatically revive. The U.S. Army desperately needed weapons for the Mexican War, and a Texas Ranger named Captain Samuel Walker specifically sought out Colt for an improved design. That massive contract effectively brought Colt back from the brink and launched his empire. Moving on to Section 2, we get to the legendary rivalries, Colt versus Smith & Wesson and the other titans of the era. And this brilliantly illustrates the intense arms race that this booming market bred. Remington and Sons had actually been pushing precision boundaries way back since Eliphalet Remington hand-forged his very first rifle barrel in 1816. So by the mid-19th century, the competition is absolutely fierce. On one side, you have Colt, forever linked with the mythos of the American frontier, especially with the 1873 Peacemaker single-action army, celebrated as the weapon that tamed the West. On the other side, you have Smith & Wesson, founded in 1852. They fiercely challenged Colt's dominance by pushing for a faster, more reliable shooting experience, eventually bringing us the first double-action revolvers. And through it all, companies like Remington were right there, driving the manufacturing standards higher and higher. Just look at the 1862 Colt New Model holster pistol. It's a prime example of the era's craftsmanship. But here is the critical context for why things had to change. This fierce corporate rivalry was happening just as the American Civil War broke out. Suddenly, the military demanded massive, unprecedented quantities of highly reliable weapons. The old ways of making guns slowly by hand? Yeah, that simply wasn't going to cut it anymore. Which leads us to Section 3, the pursuit of perfect accuracy, and how they mechanized production. The absolute unsung mechanical hero here was Elisha K. Root. He became the superintendent at the Colt factory in 1849, and Root's genius was developing automated drop forging techniques. Instead of relying on a highly skilled craftsman to sit there and hand file every individual piece, Root used power-driven heavy machinery to press hot iron into precise steel dies. He essentially broke down the creation of a revolver into 450 heavily mechanized integrated steps. This quote by Joseph Wickham Rowe perfectly captures the dynamic. The credit for the revolver belongs to Colt. For the way they were made, mainly to Root. The true secret to Colt's massive empire wasn't just the design of a rotating cylinder. It was the unprecedented, highly systematized way those revolvers were actually manufactured on the factory floor. But Root wasn't alone in this pursuit. Enter Francis A. Pratt and Amos Whitney. These two young men met in 1860 while working at the Phoenix Iron Works in Hartford. They would spend their spare hours, often after incredibly long days of regular work, designing and developing new machinery. What united them was a shared, almost sacred respect for absolute accuracy. So the crucial point is how completely these men redefined precision. Before the Civil War, machinists casually talked about margins of error in 30 seconds of an inch. Pratt & Whitney became obsessed with shrinking that margin. They pushed the boundaries of theoretical and practical accuracy down to the thousandths, 10,000ths, and eventually millionths of an inch. Millions! This relentless obsession literally laid the foundation for modern mechanics. This completely changed the game, bringing us to Section 4, the American system, a true paradigm shift. So what is it? Well, the American system of manufacture relies entirely on the machine production of standardized, highly precise, interchangeable parts. If you specify the exact dimension and completely control the machine process, you can make things that fit together flawlessly on an assembly line without any human adjustment. Colt actually proudly displayed this revolutionary system at the 1851 Crystal Palace exhibition in London, and it absolutely amazed the international audience. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale this system created. Look at this. Pratt & Whitney went from designing tools in a cramped room to operating this massive, illuminated factory complex. Precision manufacturing exploded from a niche endeavor into a colossal industrial force, forever changing the landscape of the Connecticut River Valley and way beyond.
Finally, Section 5, the modern precision legacy, taking us from rifles directly to cars.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the stuff we use every single day. Because the exact same machine technology developed to drill a perfectly precise hole in a rifle barrel was very soon adapted to drill a motor bus crankshaft. This technology rapidly spread to technically related industries. Tools initially refined for war were fundamentally repurposed to mass-produce peacetime consumer machines. We're talking everything from sewing machines and typewriters to bicycles and eventually automobiles. And for modern shooters and manufacturers, the legacy of the American system is everywhere today. It's the very reason Magpul magazines feed reliably in Colt pattern lowers, and why military specification parts, like bolt carrier groups, swap flawlessly between entirely different brands. International standards like NATO STANAG ensure cross-compatibility without a gunsmith having to hand-file anything. Today's CNC mills and strict dimensional controls, they are all a direct extension of the same interchangeable parts problems solved in those early armories. Which leaves us with this final, rather wild thought. If an intense 19th century corporate rivalry to build a better handgun secretly laid the groundwork for the entire mechanical age, what modern conflicts and competitions are quietly building our technological future right now? It really makes you look at the ripple effects of history in a whole new light, doesn't it? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning how the world around you was built.